Red Wing software maintains the tax tables for both federal and state payroll taxes within CenterPoint as long as you keep up with your software updates. There are, however, some states that have a local tax that is required. That local tax might be a county tax, a school tax, it could be a municipal tax. There's a whole bunch of different types of local taxes. The responsibility of the local tax is up to the user, and those taxes are maintained underneath Setup, Payroll Details, and Local Taxes. You'll see here that there are just a couple local taxes that are out here by default, but even those default ones, if they apply to you, you'd want to go ahead and edit them and go into the detail and just make sure that any of the amounts in there and percentages are correct for the tax today. If it is not on the list, then you're going to click New to create that new tax. It'll need to have an abbreviation that is unique among all of the other local taxes. So I have a Denver city tax here, and so I'm going to call it Denver. After that, you have a sequence. So if any employee has more than one local tax, this sequence is going to determine the order in which those local taxes appear on your tax forms. Okay. After that, we're going to give it a name, and we're going to choose the state that it's for. So, oops, I wanted to choose Colorado there. So we'll choose Colorado. After that is a checkbox that asks you if you want to allow a flat tax. So if this tax is using a tax table, are we going to allow an employee to say that they don't want you to use the tax tables, but instead want you to use a local, like just a flat tax, like let's say 7%, for example. So are you going to allow the overriding of the tax tables for a flat tax percentage? If you are, then you can leave that as checked. If not, then you can uncheck it. And even if you check it, you don't have to use it. The second check mark is, can an earning be subject to this tax but not withheld? So you can assign this tax to an employee, but then say that it's not going to be calculated by default. And you'll see that when we get to the employee, there's a little checkbox that you can say that it's not being calculated. And that will show up then as taxable wages on any tax forms for them, but it becomes a responsibility of the employee themselves to go ahead and pay those taxes because they're not being taken out of their paycheck. Now, most taxes on tax forms will just use your state tax ID, but if there is a separate tax ID that they have assigned you for this tax, then you should mark that that there is a tax ID required and give it a label. And then there'll be a place when you go to add that tax to the employer that will ask you for that tax ID. Some taxes require a rounding. So you have a rounding to round it to the nearest dollar, and you can make that either optional or required, or you can say that there is no rounding. Now, depending on the state that you've selected, when you click on tax forms item, you may have different tax forms listed below. The one that I'm looking for, the Denver municipal one, is not one of the options here, so I'm going to choose generic local withholding, and that'll be the case anytime that the tax that you're wanting is not included. Now, that was Colorado doesn't have a lot of local taxes, but a state such as Indiana, which has a county tax, if I had selected that as my state and clicked on the tax forms item, you'll see that it actually has a tax for each of the counties. And if I need multiple counties for the employees that I have working for me, I would need to create one of these local taxes for each of the counties. Okay. Otherwise, I would just choose that generic local withholding. I'm going to go back to selecting Colorado here. And then I'm ready to move over to the Detail tab. On the Detail tab, there's a place here for the employee method and the employer method. So a tax can be either just an employee tax, it could be something that just the employer pays, or it can have a portion that is for both the employee and the employer. The one that I'm working with is just an employee tax. When I click on that option, it gives me different methods on how you can calculate that. If it's one of the states where it's a known tax that we know that you're going to have, like Indiana County or Ohio school tax. Those methods are already built in, and so that's all you have to do is select that. Otherwise, you're going to select the way that it's calculated. So is it a percentage of another tax? If you choose that, you'll choose the other tax that it is a percentage of. So let's say that it is a percentage of the Colorado state withholding, and it is 7% of the Colorado state withholding. That's how you would select that. That's not the case for this tax, so I'm going to move on. You have a percentage of tax with a annual amount limit, an annual limit, a monthly limit, a per pay period limit, a percentage of wage tax with no limit, percentage of wage tax with a wage limit. Okay, you have a fixed amount tax. They have a fixed amount tax with a minimum wage amount and a monthly limit. You have an hourly rate tax. Okay, so those are your different options. The one that I need is called the fixed with minimum wage and monthly limit. I'm going to have to choose a liability account, and I've already got a liability out here for my Denver City tax liability. Now, this particular tax at this time is $5.75 per month. Okay, I need to have at least $500 in monthly wages, and the limit on that tax is going to be $5.75. Okay, so it's never going to get more than the $5.75 in a month. So I'm going to go ahead and click save on that. Now I'm going to edit it again and go back there. If there had been an employer method, I would have the option to go here and choose that employer method. And as I chose one of those, it would fill in the right-hand side with how is that employer method calculated. So you'd have to fill in the details for that. And you would have to choose an expense account that you want that additional expense to go to. This particular tax does not have an employer method, so I'm just going to click save on it. Okay, that automatically adds it to your employer record, so there's nothing you need to do there, but we do need to add it to the employees. So I'm going to go to set up an employees, and we're going to highlight one of my employees that we need to add it to. And so Jerry Berry is that employee. I'm going to edit him. And we're going to go to the taxes tab. Now, Jerry happens to already have the Colorado taxes selected. If he did not, then you'd want to first check the box for Colorado taxes, and then it would put it on the tree here. Then as I highlight Colorado, you'll notice below that the local tax is not selected yet. So I want to select that so it puts a level on the tree for that, and then highlight the local tax and add the Denver tax. As I highlighted over here, there really isn't anything on the right-hand side that I need to fill out unless there's an account number that I do need to go ahead and put in there. But otherwise, I don't need to fill anything out here. I'm going to click save on that employee. Oh, actually, let me go back into that employee. There is one other thing that I did want to talk about there. As I highlight that local tax on the employee, there is a checkbox here for a default tax calculation. Remember when I said you could check the one box that would allow a wage to be subject to this tax but not have it calculated? If you want it to be subject to this tax but not have it be calculated, you'll turn that checkbox off. Okay. If you no longer need the tax anymore and it should not be an active tax, then you would take the active tax off. Okay, so that's kind of the difference between those two check boxes there. If you needed to add that local tax to more than one employee, you would go to Setup and Payroll Details and to Employee Mass Update. And there is going to be an option there that would allow you to add a tax to more than one employee at a time. I'm not going to go through the employee mass update at this time. There is a separate video on how to go ahead and go through the employee mass update. There are some reports for local taxes. Underneath reports, there's a section under payroll tax data reports for state and local taxes. So you would be able to get state and local tax withheld reports, and both a summarized and a detailed report for that. Okay, there will also be, if there are any required Atrix tax forms, there would be Atrix tax forms for that new local tax as well.